I was supposed to get married the next day. The thought played on a loop in my head, a frantic, skipping record that refused to find a new groove. Tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, I, Isolde Rivera, would become Mrs. Owen Griff. The idea should have filled me with a giddy, soaring joy. Instead, a cold, heavy dread was settling in the pit of my stomach, as dense and suffocating as a block of granite. Everything was ready. My mother, before she passed, had helped me pick the dress, an ethereal creation of ivory lace and silk that now hung in a pristine bag on my closet door, a silent, beautiful ghost of a promise. The venue was a historic botanical garden, a place Owen and I had stumbled upon during a weekend trip, where we'd sworn we could feel magic humming in the air between the ancient, twisting trees and vibrant, fragrant blossoms. Hundreds of invitations had been sent, and the RSVPs covered our refrigerator, a mosaic of love and well wishes from everyone we knew. My life was a carefully constructed blueprint, and I was standing on the precipice of its completion. I was 22, about to graduate with a degree in art history, and deeply in love with my best friend. Owen was my anchor, my calm in any storm. We had known each other since kindergarten, when he'd pushed a bully who stole my crayons, and I'd patched up his scraped knee with a cartoon bandage. Our love wasn't a fiery, tempestuous affair. It was a slow-growing oak, its roots deep and tangled together, its branches reaching for the same patch of sky. It was safe. It was steady. It was everything I thought I wanted. But the night before the wedding, the blueprint was set on fire. It was my bachelorette party, an event orchestrated with manic enthusiasm by my older sister Morgana. Morgana was my opposite in every conceivable way. Where I was quiet and content with a book, she was the life of every party, a whirlwind of vibrant chaos. She had hair the color of midnight and eyes that held a mischievous, often sharp glint. She'd always claimed to be my biggest protector, yet there was a current of rivalry that ran between us, a low, thrumming tension I could never quite put my finger on. She wanted Owen for herself. I knew that in the way you know a storm is coming long before you see the clouds. She flirted with him relentlessly, her touches lingering a second too long, her laughter a little too loud when he was near. Owen, bless his heart, was oblivious, seeing her only as my goofy older sister. I saw the possessive gleam in her eyes. "Come on, Izzy," she'd chirped that night, pulling me onto the crowded dance floor of a flashy downtown club. No long faces. Tonight is all about you letting loose before you're officially ball and chained. My friends, a small, loyal group from college, were there, all wearing matching bride's crew sashes. But Morgana dominated the evening. She kept ordering rounds of drinks, pushing a brightly colored concoction into my hand every time I finished one. I was never a big drinker, and I tried to pace myself, but she was insistent.
"One more," she'd urged, her smile wide and predatory, for the bride-to-be. I remember the last drink clearly. It was a vibrant blue, tasted vaguely of coconut and something else. Something bitter and chemical that I wrinkled my nose at. "What is this?" I asked, shouting over the pulsing bass. "It's a special. This something blue," Morgana yelled back, clinking her glass against mine. "Drink up. It's good luck." I hesitated. A wave of dizziness had already washed over me, the edges of the room blurring slightly. I felt disconnected, as if I were watching myself from a great distance. I shook my head, trying to clear it. "I think I've had enough, Morgana. I should switch to water." Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Don't be a party pooper, Isolde. It's your last night of freedom. Live a little." She nudged the glass toward my lips. For me, to keep the peace, to avoid the dramatic scene I knew she was capable of making, I gave in. I tipped my head back and swallowed the syrupy liquid. That was my last clear memory of the night. The next moments are a fractured, confusing collage of sensations and images. The club lights seemed to melt into long, Dali-esque streaks. The music became a distorted, heavy thudding inside my skull. I remember stumbling, Morgana's arm hooking through mine, her voice a sharp, urgent whisper in my ear. "Let's get some air." The cool night air didn't help. The world tilted on its axis, and my legs felt like they were made of cotton. I remember the scratchy upholstery of a car, the scent of unfamiliar leather, and a dark, masculine cologne that was nothing like Owen's clean, soapy scent. Then a hotel corridor. The wallpaper, a garish gold and black pattern, seemed to writhe and swim before my eyes. A heavy wooden door, a click of a lock, and then darkness. I awoke with a gasp, my body feeling heavy and foreign. A sliver of pale morning light pierced through a gap in the heavy hotel curtains, illuminating a swirl of dust motes dancing in the air. My head was pounding with a vicious, relentless rhythm, a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil. A thick, syrupy fog clogged my thoughts. Where was I? I tried to sit up, but a heavy weight was draped over my waist. An arm, a man's arm, muscular and tanned with a light dusting of dark hair. My heart leapt into my throat. Owen. He must have picked me up from the club. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy again. I'd had too much to drink, and my sweet, dependable fiancé had come to the rescue. I turned my head, a loving smile on my lips, ready to whisper his name, but the man beside me was not Owen. My breath hitched. My blood ran cold. He was a stranger. He was lying on his stomach, his face turned away from me, buried in the pillow. Broad, sculpted shoulders tapered down to a narrow waist. His skin was the color of warm bronze, and a complex tapestry of black ink snaked across his back and down the arms slung possessively over me. Owen didn't have any tattoos. Owen's hair was a soft, sandy brown. This man's was as black as a raven's wing, thick and slightly damp against the white pillowcase.
Panic, stark and electrifying, seized me. I was naked. The sheet was pulled around my waist, exposing my bare skin to the cool, stale air of the room. I looked down at the stranger's hand resting on my hip, at the long, strong fingers, and a wave of nausea roiled in my gut. I tried to slide out from under his arm, my movements clumsy and panicked. The rustle of the sheets caused him to stir. He shifted, rolling onto his back with a low groan, and I saw his face. He was devastatingly handsome, but in a way that was dangerous and unsettling. His features were sharp and angular, all high cheekbones and a strong, stubborn jawline that was shadowed with dark stubble. Even in sleep, his brow was furrowed, as if he were wrestling with some dark thought. His lips were full and well-defined, and for a horrifying, sickening moment, a flash of a memory, a phantom sensation flickered through my mind. Those lips on mine, hard and demanding. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to banish the image. This wasn't happening. It was a nightmare. A horrible, vivid, alcohol-fueled nightmare. I would wake up in my own bed, and Owen would be there, and we would laugh about how wild my bachelorette party had been. But when I opened my eyes, the stranger was still there, and his eyes were open. They weren't the soft, gentle blue of Owen's eyes. They were a startling, intense shade of gold, like molten honey, and they were fixed on me with a burning, predatory focus. In the dim light, they seemed to almost glow with their own internal fire. For a second, just a split second, I thought I saw the pupils elongate, becoming almost slit-like before they returned to normal. I blinked, my foggy brain struggling to process what I was seeing. He didn't seem surprised to see me. There was no confusion in his gaze, only a deep, unnerving watchfulness. He pushed himself up on one elbow, the sheet falling away to reveal a chest that was a roadmap of lean, hard muscle, also adorned with that intricate black ink. A scent wafted from him, not the cologne I'd smelled in the car, but something else, something wild and primal, like a forest after a thunderstorm, all damp earth, pine, and ozone. It was intoxicating and terrifying all at once. "Good morning," he said. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble that vibrated through my very bones. It sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I couldn't speak. My throat was sealed shut with fear. I scrambled backward, clutching the sheet to my chest, my back hitting the cold, hard headboard. My clothes. Where were my clothes? My eyes darted around the unfamiliar room, a generic, luxury hotel suite, all dark wood and muted tones. My dress, a sparkly silver number Morgana had insisted I wear, was in a heap on the floor by the window, along with a pair of strappy heels. Who are you?" I finally managed to whisper, my voice a pathetic, shaky thing. A slow, lazy smirk touched his lips, but it didn't reach his piercing golden eyes. "You don't remember?" Tears pricked at my eyes as shame and horror washed over me in a scalding wave. I shook my head, my hair, tangled and messy, falling into my face. "No, I don't remember anything. I was at my bachelorette party. My sister, she gave me a drink." My voice trailed off as the bitter, chemical taste flooded my memory. I had been drugged. The realization hit me not with a gradual dawning, but with the force of a physical blow. Morgana. She had done this. The stranger's expression shifted. The smirk vanished, replaced by a flicker of something I couldn't identify. Annoyance? Or was it concern? He sat up fully, seemingly unconcerned with his own nudity. "You were drugged?" he asked, his voice sharper now, more focused. I nodded, unable to stop the tears that now streamed down my cheeks.
I'm getting married today, I sobbed, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I was supposed to get married. He was silent for a long moment, his golden eyes studying my face intently, as if he were trying to read something written there. He reached out a hand toward me, and I flinched back so violently I nearly fell off the other side of the bed. He stopped, his hand hovering in the air between us. "I won't hurt you," he said, his voice softer now, that rough, gravelly edge smoothed away. "What happened last night?" I demanded, my voice gaining a little strength from the anger that was beginning to burn through my fear. Did we? I couldn't bring myself to say the words. He looked at me, his gaze unwavering. Yes. A raw, keening sound of despair escaped my lips. It felt like the world was collapsing in on me, the beautiful future I had so carefully planned turning to dust and ruin. I had lost my innocence, the one thing I had been saving for my husband, to a complete stranger, all because of my sister's cruel, inexplicable jealousy. I had to get out of there. Fueled by a desperate surge of adrenaline, I leapt from the bed, grabbing the sheet and wrapping myself around it. I snatched my dress and shoes from the floor and bolted for the bathroom, slamming the heavy door shut and locking it behind me. I leaned against it, my body trembling uncontrollably, my breath coming in ragged, painful sobs. I dressed with fumbling, shaking hands, not bothering with my underwear, which was nowhere to be seen. The silver dress felt cheap and tawdry now, its sequins scratching against my skin. I stared at my reflection in the large, gilt-framed mirror. My makeup was smeared, my eyes were red and puffy, and there was a faint, dark mark on my neck, just below my ear. A bite mark. No, not a bite. A bruise. A love bite. Vomit rose in my throat, and I lurched toward the toilet, retching until there was nothing left but bitter bile. When I finally emerged from the bathroom, my face scrubbed raw and my hair hastily pulled back, the man was dressed. He was wearing dark, expensive-looking trousers and a crisp black shirt, the top few buttons undone, revealing the inked skin at the base of his throat. He was standing by the window, staring out at the city below, his broad back to me.
"I have to go," I whispered, my voice hoarse. He turned slowly. His golden eyes swept over me, taking in my disheveled state. "Isolde," he said. My blood froze. How did he know my name? "How do you know my name?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You told me," he said simply. I didn't believe him. I hadn't been capable of telling anyone anything. Morgana, she must have told him. She had not only drugged me, she had delivered me to this man. She had orchestrated my ruin. "I don't know what game you and my sister are playing," I spat, my fear momentarily eclipsed by a wave of white-hot fury. "But stay away from me. Don't ever contact me again." I turned and fled, not waiting for a reply. I didn't look back as I ran down the long, empty corridor, my ridiculous heels clutched in my hand. I didn't stop until I was out on the street, the cool morning air a slap to my face, the sounds of the waking city a jarring cacophony. I hailed the first taxi I saw and gave the driver my address, sinking into the back seat and finally letting the full force of my despair consume me. The wedding was in 8 hours, and my life was over. The confrontation with Owen was even worse than I could have imagined. I found him in the living room of our small shared apartment, pacing back and forth, his face a mask of worry and anger. He was already dressed in his tuxedo trousers and a white shirt, his bow tie hanging undone around his neck. "Izzy, where have you been?" he exclaimed, rushing toward me. "I've been calling you and Morgana all night. I was about to call the police." His words, filled with genuine concern, were a knife in my already bleeding heart. I couldn't meet his eyes. I just stood there in the doorway, clutching my shoes,
still wearing the dress of my shame. "Owen, we need to talk," I began, my voice barely a whisper. He took in my appearance then, the wrinkled dress, the tear-streaked face, the wild look in my eyes. His expression hardened. "What's going on, Isolde? What happened last night?" And so I told him. The words came out in a torrent, jumbled and incoherent, punctuated by sobs. I told him about the drink, about Morgana's insistence, about the memory gaps and the hotel room and the stranger. I told him everything. He listened in stony silence, his arms crossed over his chest, his kind blue eyes growing colder and more distant with every word I spoke. When I was finished, the silence in the room was deafening. "So, let me get this straight," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You're telling me that on the night before our wedding, you got drunk, went to a hotel with some random guy, and slept with him, and now you're trying to blame it all on your sister?" "No," I cried, taking a step toward him. "Owen, you don't understand. I was drugged. I didn't know what was happening." "Oh, I think I understand perfectly," he sneered, and the sound was so foreign, so ugly coming from his lips. "I understand that my fiancé cheated on me hours before she was supposed to walk down the aisle." "That's not what happened. Why won't you believe me?" I begged, reaching for his hand. He snatched it away as if I were something unclean. "Because it's pathetic, Isolde. It's a pathetic, cowardly excuse," he yelled, his face turning red. "Did you get cold feet? Is that it? Was this your last little hurrah before tying yourself down to boring, dependable Owen? You know that's not true. I love you. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you love making terrible, selfish decisions that destroy everything we've built." At that moment, the apartment door opened, and Morgana walked in, looking fresh and immaculate in a floral sundress. She feigned a look of surprise. "Oh my goodness, what's going on? Izzy, honey, you look terrible. I was so worried when you disappeared from the club last night." "You!" I shrieked, whirling on her. "You did this. You drugged me." Morgana gasped, placing a hand over her heart in a gesture of mock horror. "Isolde, what are you talking about? You were the one who wanted to keep the party going. I tried to get you to go home, but you insisted on going off with, well, with that man." She turned to Owen, her eyes wide and innocent. "Owen, I'm so sorry. I tried to stop her." Owen looked from my distraught face to Morgana's perfectly composed one, and in that moment, I saw him make his choice. He chose the easier story, the simpler one. The one where I was the villain and not the victim of a betrayal so profound it defied comprehension. "Get out," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He wasn't looking at Morgana, he was looking at me. "Owen, please," I sobbed. "Get out, Isolde," he repeated, his voice rising. "The wedding is off. I don't ever want to see you again." The words struck me with the force of a physical blow. I stumbled backward, my vision blurring with tears. Morgana had a triumphant, venomous smirk on her face. She had won. She had taken everything from me in a single night. Numbly, I turned and walked out of the apartment, out of the life we had built together. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. The dream was dead, and I was adrift in the wreckage. As if my sister's betrayal and the loss of my fiancé weren't enough, a month later I received the final, crushing blow. I was pregnant. 2 faint pink lines on a plastic stip, purchased from a late-night pharmacy with trembling hands. I stared at them for what felt like an eternity, my mind refusing to accept what my eyes were seeing. Pregnant, with a stranger's child, the child of my assault. My first instinct was to hide it, to deal with it alone, but I was broke, homeless, and crashing on a friend's couch. I had no choice but to go to my father. My father, Brogan Rivera, was a man who valued 2 things above all else: reputation and control. He was a prominent city councilman, with his sights set firmly on the upcoming mayoral election. He had always been a demanding, emotionally distant father, pushing me and Morgana to be perfect reflections of his own ambition. My canceled wedding had been a public embarrassment for him. I couldn't imagine how he would react to this. I found him in his home office, a grand, mahogany-paneled room that always smelled of old books and cigar smoke. He was on the phone, his voice booming and confident. He gestured for me to sit, his eyes barely glancing in my direction. When he finally hung up, he leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers, fixing me with a cold, appraising stare. Isolde, I trust you have a good reason for this unexpected visit. I'm extremely busy. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. Dad, I need to tell you something. I couldn't bring myself to look at him, instead focusing on a framed photograph on his desk. A smiling, happy family from a lifetime ago, before my mother died, before my father's heart turned to stone. I'm pregnant. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. I finally dared to look up. My father's face was a thunderous mask of fury. A dark red flush crept up his neck, and a vein pulsed in his temple. "You're what?" he ground out, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "I'm pregnant," I repeated, my own voice surprisingly steady. He slammed his fist on the desk, making the picture frame jump. "And who is the father? That spineless griff boy? Did you manage to trap him after all?" "No," I said quietly. "It's not Owens." His eyes narrowed. "Then who? Don't tell me you've already found some other worthless boy to shame this family with." "I don't know who the father is," I admitted, the words tasting like poison. He stared at me, his expression a mixture of disbelief and utter disgust. I quickly explained what had happened, my voice shaking as I recounted Morgana's betrayal. He listened, his face growing colder with every word. When he finished, he didn't offer a single word of comfort or sympathy. He didn't rage against Morgana for what she had done. His focus was singular, his concern selfish. "You mean to tell me," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "that you don't even know the father's name?" "Dad, Morgana drugged me. I didn't even know what I was doing until the next morning." "I don't care," he said, his voice like chips of ice. "I don't care about your pathetic, sordid little stories. Do you have any idea what a scandal like this could do to me, to my campaign?" He stood up and began to pace behind his desk, his movements agitated, like a caged tiger. "This child will not ruin my reputation. I have a good chance in the upcoming mayoral election. I will not let you, with your recklessness and your drama, destroy everything I have worked for." He stopped and pointed a finger at me, his eyes blazing with cold fury. "You're going to get rid of it. Immediately." A fierce, protective instinct I didn't know I possessed surged through me. My hand instinctively went to my still flat stomach. This child, this tiny, innocent life, conceived in such a brutal, traumatic way, was not a mistake. It was not a scandal. It was mine. "I won't," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound strength. "It's my child. You can't force me." My father's face contorted into a sneer of pure contempt. "Can't I? Watch me. If you insist on carrying this bastard, you will do so without my name, without my money, and without my protection." He walked to the door and held it open. "Then you'll give birth to it on the streets, because you won't have my support," he said coldly. "You are no longer my daughter. Get out of my house." I had made my decision. It was a hard one, but there was no other choice. I left my family and the ghost of my love for Owen behind. With no one left to support me, I turned to the only person I could think of, the only tenuous link I had to the other half of this child's creation. I found the hotel, got the date, and prayed they would have a record. They did. The room was registered under a corporate account, and after much pleading, a sympathetic manager gave me the contact information for the company's legal department. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. I took a bus to a sleek downtown skyscraper and asked for the lawyer. His name was Sebastian, a man with silver hair, an impeccably tailored suit, and eyes that saw far too much. He listened to my story without a flicker of expression on his face, his hands resting calmly on a polished desk that was completely bare except for a single state-of-the-art laptop. "Mr. Sebastian," I finished, my voice exhausted but firm, "I don't expect your client to get involved or help, but he should know he's going to be a father." Sebastian nodded slowly, his gaze analytical. He typed something into his laptop. his fingers flying across the keyboard. After a moment, he looked up at me. "Miss Rivera, my client is aware of the situation, and he wants to offer his support." I was taken aback. "His support?" "Financial support," he clarified. "He is prepared to cover everything, all prenatal and birth-related medical expenses. He will set up a trust to fund a full college scholarship. He will also provide a generous monthly stipend for living expenses, enough for you to live comfortably and finish your degree. All you have to do is sign this contract." He slid a thick, leather-bound document across the desk toward me. I stared at it, my mind reeling. Why was this man, this stranger, being so generous? He hadn't even shown his face. He was just a ghost, a name on a corporate account. There had to be a catch. "What's the catch?" Mr. Sebastian gave me a small, unreadable smile. "My client is a very private man. The contract includes a non-disclosure agreement of the strictest terms. You will never attempt to identify him, contact him, or reveal the circumstances of your child's conception to anyone." He paused, letting the weight of his next words sink in. "And there is one other clause. If, at any point in the next 18 years, my client decides he wants to be a part of the child's life, you agreed to grant him immediate joint custody. Furthermore, you and the child will be required to live in his primary residence under his protection." I was shocked into silence. The audacity of it was breathtaking. This man, this nameless, faceless stranger, wouldn't even give me the dignity of knowing who he was. Yet he wanted the right to rip my life apart whenever it suited him, to march back in and claim my child, forcing us to live with him? My fear and desperation warred with a hot, righteous anger. He thought he could buy my silence and my compliance. He thought his money made him God. A spark of defiance, a tiny flame I thought had been extinguished, flickered to life inside me. I would take his money. I would use it to build a life for my child, a good life, far away from the poison of my family and the ghosts of my past. But I would never let him win. One thing was certain. If he ever did decide to show up, I planned to make his life a living hell. With that spark burning in my eyes, I picked up the expensive fountain pen from the desk. "Deal," I said, my voice hard as steel. I scrawled my signature on the line, the ink a stark black promise. "I hope he comes crawling back one day, because I will make him regret it." 6 years later, I was raising my son Leo alone, in a small, sun-drenched apartment in Miami. The city's vibrant energy was a world away from the stuffy, conservative town where I grew up. Here, no one knew my story. No one knew the son of the disgraced Rivera girl. I was just another single mom, and I liked it that way. The stranger's money had been my lifeline. True to the lawyer's word, a substantial amount was deposited into my account every month. It allowed me to finish my degree, get a small but safe apartment, and provide for Leo without having to work 3 jobs. But I refused to be complacent. I didn't want to be dependent on his blood money for a second longer than I had to be. I was working through a grueling, unpaid internship at a local art museum, hoping it would lead to a permanent position. Life was tough, but it was ours. It was peaceful. Leo was my entire world. He was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, with a wild mop of black hair and my own blue eyes. But sometimes, when he looked at me, I would see a flash of something else in his gaze, an intensity, a startling intelligence that seemed far beyond his 6 years. And his eyes, sometimes in the right light, I could have sworn they had flecks of gold in them. He was preternaturally strong for his age, and his senses were incredibly keen. He could hear the ice cream truck from 5 blocks away and smell rain long before the clouds gathered. I chalked it up to the normal quirks of childhood, but a small, uneasy part of me wondered about the man who was his father. What traits, what secrets lay dormant in his DNA? That piece we had so carefully built shattered on a Tuesday afternoon. I had ordered us a pizza for dinner, a rare treat. I ran down to the lobby of our building to pay the delivery guy, leaving Leo watching cartoons in the apartment. "I'll be right back, sweetie. Don't open the door for anyone." "Okay, Mommy," he chirped, his eyes glued to the screen. It should have taken 5 minutes, max, but as I was heading back up, the ancient elevator shuddered, groaned, and died between the 2nd and 3rd floors. I was stuck. I pressed the emergency button, but it took what felt like an eternity for the building's maintenance man to arrive. By the time the doors were pried open nearly 45 minutes later, a frantic, icy panic was clawing at my throat. I sprinted up the final flight of stairs and burst into our apartment. "Leo?" Silence.
The television was still on, a cheerful cartoon beam song mocking the frantic pounding of my heart. A half-finished glass of apple juice sat on the coffee table, but the apartment was empty. "Leo!" I screamed, my voice raw with terror. I ran through the small apartment, checking his room, the bathroom, even the closets. He was gone. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a sweet, elderly woman who often gave Leo cookies, opened her door, her face etched with concern at my screams. "Isolde, dear, is everything all right?" "It's Leo," I gasped, struggling to breathe. "He's gone. Did you see him?" Her brow furrowed. "Why, yes, I saw him get into a car not 20 minutes ago. I assumed you were with him. It was such a fancy car, I thought perhaps your family had come to visit." My blood ran cold. "What kind of car?" "Oh, a big black one. Very shiny. The man who opened the door for him was wearing a lovely suit." Panic, pure and undiluted, propelled me. I didn't even stop to thank her. I flew down the stairs and burst out onto the street, my heart ready to explode from my chest. Lined up in front of my modest apartment building were not one, but 4 gleaming black luxury cars. They were silent and imposing, their tinted windows like the eyes of predatory beasts. They screamed money and power, completely out of place in my quiet working-class neighborhood. My son was in one of them. A primal scream of rage and fear built in my throat. I launched myself at the nearest car, ready to beat on the window, to smash it with my bare hands if I had to. But before I could land the first blow, a familiar, calm voice stopped me cold. "It's okay, Miss Rivera. Leo is with us." I spun around. It was him, Mr. Sebastian, the lawyer. He looked exactly the same as he had 6 years ago. Not a single silver hair out of place, his expensive suit unruffled. He stood beside the lead car, his expression calm and unreadable. "Where is my son?" I demanded, my voice a feral snarl. I advanced on him, my hands curled into fists. "What have you done with him?" "He's perfectly safe," he said calmly, unfazed by my aggression. "He's inside, with his father." The world stopped. The sounds of the city, the traffic, the distant sirens, the chatter of people on the sidewalk, all faded into a dull, muffled roar. My breath hitched in my chest. His father? Sebastian opened the back door of the lead car, and there, sitting inside, was my son. Leo was perched on the plush leather seat, his small legs dangling, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and confusion. He was holding a brand-new, expensive-looking toy spaceship.
Beside him sat a man. The interior of the car was cast in shadow, but I could make out a powerful silhouette. He was dressed in a suit that was even sharper and more expensive than the lawyer's. He turned his head slightly, and the fading afternoon light caught the sharp angles of his profile. A strong jaw, a straight nose. Spanish features, I thought absently, my mind struggling to catch up. He radiated an aura of absolute command, of still, coiled power that seemed to suck all the air out of the surrounding space. Leo looked from the man to me, his expression uncertain. "Mommy?" I took a shaky step toward the car, my eyes locked on the shadowy figure. He leaned forward slightly, and my heart stopped dead in my chest. I couldn't see his face clearly, not yet, but I knew. That scent, that wild, primal scent of pine and storm, drifted from the car, a ghost from a 6-year-old nightmare. It was him. "Who are you?" Leo asked the man, his small voice cutting through the thick tension. The man's deep, rumbling voice filled the car, a sound that resonated in my very soul. "My name is Darkin," he replied. His gaze flickered up, and through the tinted glass I felt, more than saw, his eyes find mine. And what if I told you, I'm your father? Leo stared at him, his head tilted. My mommy said my father was a ghost. A low, humorless chuckle. "No, Leo, not a ghost." Later that evening, after a tense, brief conversation in which Mr. Sebastian informed me that Darkin wished for us to join him for dinner to discuss things properly, I found myself on a high-speed ferry slicing through the dark waters of Biscayne Bay. Sebastian had given me an address, or rather a set of coordinates. The destination, he had explained, was a private island. As we approached, a mansion materialized out of the twilight. It wasn't just a mansion, it was a modern fortress, a sprawling compound of glass, steel, and dark stone that seemed to rise organically from the rocky shoreline. It was opulent and intimidating, surrounded by lush tropical vegetation and patrolled by men in dark suits who spoke into their wrists. Leo was with Sebastian in a different car, a measure, the lawyer had explained, to give me time to compose myself. In reality, it was to ensure I couldn't run with my son. A maid with a silent, deferential manner led me through vast, minimalist rooms filled with priceless art and into a dining room that could have seated 30. A long, polished obsidian table was set for 3. I sat down, my hands clenched in my lap, my stomach churning with a toxic cocktail of dread and fury. A few moments later, he entered, and my heart didn't just stop this time. It felt like it shattered. He was no longer a shadow in a car or a half-remembered figure in a dark hotel room. The full, undiluted force of his presence hit me like a physical blow. He was taller than I remembered, with the powerful, predatory grace of a panther. He wore a simple black Henley that stretched across his broad chest and shoulders, and dark trousers. The intricate tattoos I remembered snaked up his neck from the collar of his shirt.
But it was his face that stole my breath. The sharp, aristocratic features, the stubborn jaw, the full lips, and his eyes. Those molten gold eyes, as fiery and intense as I remembered, fixed on me with an unreadable expression. "You," I gasped, the single word a choked, venomous whisper. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible smile. It held no warmth, only a kind of weary acknowledgement. "Hello, Isolde." He walked to the head of the table and sat down, his movements fluid and economical. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Please, sit." I remained frozen, my mind a chaotic storm of hatred, fear, and 6 years of unanswered questions. How dare he? How dare he shatter my life, abandon me to pick up the pieces, and then swan back in as if he had the right? "How have you been?" he asked softly, his deep voice sending an involuntary shiver through me. Something inside me snapped. The years of repressed rage, of shame, of lonely nights and difficult days all coalesced into a single explosive point. Before I even knew what I was doing, I was on my feet. I crossed the space between us in 3 long strides, and my hand flew through the air, connecting with his face with a crack that echoed in the cavernous room. The force of the slap stung my palm, and my arm trembled from the impact. I had slapped him. I had slapped this powerful, dangerous man. He didn't even flinch. He just sat there, his head turned slightly from the blow, a red mark already blooming on his tan cheek. His golden eyes, now blazing with a terrifying, otherworldly light, slowly turned back to meet mine. Before I could react further, before I could even take a breath, the room was filled with movement. 2 guards, dressed in the same dark suits as the men outside, materialized from nowhere, their movements unnaturally fast and silent. One grabbed my arms, pinning them behind my back with breathtaking strength. "Your Royal Highness, are you all right?" one of them asked, his voice laced with a panicked deference that seemed utterly out of place. My mind snagged on the words, my own fury momentarily forgotten. "Your what?" I snapped, struggling against the guard's iron grip. Darkin slowly raised his hand, and the guards instantly released me, melting back into the shadows as quickly as they had appeared. He touched his cheek, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. He sighed, a long, weary sound, and finally looked at me. The full, crushing weight of his power, of his true nature, seemed to press down on me. And for the first time, I felt a fear so profound it was primal. He said, "I am Darkin Rahl, Alpha King of the Lycan territories of North America." I stared at him, speechless, my mind refusing to process the words. Lycan? Alpha King? It sounded like something out of one of the fantasy novels I used to read. It was insane. "You expect me to believe that?" I finally managed to say, my voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and hysteria.
A flicker of dry amusement crossed his face. "Google it," he said. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely hold my phone, which one of the guards had silently retrieved from my purse and placed on the table. I typed his name into the search bar, my thumb fumbling on the screen. The results were sparse, hidden in the deep corners of the internet, on conspiracy theory sites and forums dedicated to mythical creatures. But there were whispers, mentions of a powerful, shadowy figure who controlled vast resources, a dynasty that had existed for centuries outside the bounds of human governments. There were grainy photos, alleged sightings, and hushed talk of a kingdom of shapeshifters. And then I found it, a clearer image, taken from a distance, of him standing on a balcony, an adoring crowd below him. The caption was in a language I didn't recognize, but the name was clear. Darken Rawl, Alpha King. It was true, all of it. The man I had a child with, the man who had haunted my nightmares for 6 years, was not human. He was a monster from a storybook, and so was my son. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave, knocking the air from my lungs. Leo. His unusual strength, his keen senses, the golden flecks in his eyes. It all made a terrifying, horrible kind of sense. I sank into a chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. "Why?" I whispered, looking at him, truly seeing him for the first time. "Why are you here now?" His expression softened, the hard edges of his power receding slightly. He leaned forward, his golden eyes filled with a gravity that seemed to pull me in. "He wants my son," he said simply. The words were not a request, they were a statement of fact, an unalterable truth. "He is my heir. He should live with me where he can be protected and trained for his birthright." "You have no right," I shouted, my protective instincts roaring back to life. "You have no right to him. You left us. You abandoned us for 6 years." "I didn't know he existed," Darkin said, his voice quiet and laced with a deep, resonating pain that stunned me into silence. "Isolde, that night, it was not what you think. We were both victims of a conspiracy, a trap set by my enemies to create a weakness, a half-blood heir they could control. I was drugged as well with a potent, shifter-specific aphrodisiac designed to overwhelm an alpha's control. They never intended for me to find out about the child. They planned to take him from you after he was born. But my people intercepted the communication. It has taken me 6 years to untangle their web and find you without leading them to your door." I stared at him, my heart pounding. Could he be telling the truth? It was a wild, unbelievable story, but in this new, insane reality, what was believable anymore? The thought that someone had planned to steal my baby, it made me feel sick. But even if he was telling the truth, it didn't change the fundamental fact. Leo was my son. I had raised him. I had protected him. I was not giving him up.
"No," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "He is my son. I'm not leaving him." He studied me for a long moment, a strange light in his eyes. He had expected me to fight, I realized. He had prepared for it. "I know," he said, "which is why I am not asking you to leave him." He paused, his gaze intense. "But he will live here, in the Citadel, where he will be safe from threats you cannot possibly imagine. If you wish to stay with him, you are welcome to do so." He was cornering me, using my love for my son against me. But he was right. If what he said was true, if there were powerful, monstrous enemies who wanted my child, my small Miami apartment was no longer safe. I had no choice. "If Leo stays here," I said, my voice low and fierce, "then I stay too." A slow, triumphant smirk spread across Darkenrail's face, and it was infuriatingly handsome. "Perfect," he said smoothly. "I prefer a household with both parents anyway. It's better for the heir." "You're twisting my words," I hissed. He leaned closer, his wild scent wrapping around me, making my head spin. "Didn't you sign a contract? One that stipulated that should I choose to enter his life, you and the child would live in my primary residence? You already agreed to my terms, 6 years ago." He had me. He had me completely and utterly trapped. I exhaled sharply, a ragged breath of defeat. I had to agree, but I would not make it easy for him. "Fine," I spat, "but I have conditions. I want my own room, my own suite, on the opposite side of this fortress from yours." Darkin's grin widened, a flash of white teeth in the dim light. It was a predator's smile. "You know," he said, his voice a low, suggestive purr, "the fine print in that contract also says we share a bed, to present a united front for the child." My face flushed with heat. "I would rather die," I bit out. He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated in my chest. "Who said anything about handcuffs?" he murmured, his golden eyes dancing with amusement. "Such a dirty mind." That night, I was shown to a suite of rooms that was larger than my entire Miami apartment. It had a panoramic view of the ocean, a 4-poster bed, and a bathroom carved from marble. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and terrifying. Before he left me at the door, Darkin's tone had turned serious, all traces of amusement gone. "One last thing," I sold. "For Leo's safety, no one outside this island can know who I am or what I am. Not your friends, and especially not your family. I have enemies who would exploit any weakness. If they find out Leo is my son, he will become a target." His words, meant as a warning, landed differently. For the first time, our goals were aligned. Protecting our son. My anger softened. Just a fraction. "I understand." As I closed the door, I saw him standing in the hallway, watching me go, that infuriating, confident smile once again playing on his lips. The only woman who had ever dared to slap him now lived under his roof.
He was determined to make things right, to claim his son, and perhaps even to claim me. But as I stared out at the dark, churning ocean from my luxurious prison, I made a vow. He may have trapped me here, but I would never, ever make it easy for him. The Alpha King had met his match. The first few days in the Citadel were a study in surrealism. I felt like a character in a twisted fairy tale, the mortal girl spirited away to the beast's castle. Except this castle was a marvel of modern architecture, and the beast wore tailored clothes and smelled of thunderstorms. I woke each morning in a bed larger than my first apartment, the silk sheets cool against my skin. And for a fleeting, disoriented moment, I would forget where I was. Then I would see the ocean through the floor-to-ceiling armored glass, a vast, churning expanse of gray-blue, and the reality of my situation would come crashing down on me. I was a prisoner. A pampered, well-fed prisoner in a gilded cage, but a prisoner nonetheless. My suite was in the West Wing, and Darkin's, I had been assured by a stoic, silent housekeeper, was in the East. An entire continent of polished marble floors, priceless modern art, and soaring, empty spaces lay between us. Yet his presence was a constant, oppressive weight. It was in the air I breathed, in the unnatural silence of the fortress, in the deferential, fearful way the staff addressed me as Luna, in hushed whispers when they thought I couldn't hear. I had looked the term up on the encrypted tablet left in my room, the Alpha's mate, the Queen. The absurdity of it would have been laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. Leo, on the other hand, was not a prisoner. He was a prince who had finally come home. He adapted to his new life with the seamless, unquestioning acceptance of childhood. To him, the Citadel wasn't a fortress, it was the world's greatest adventure playground. He was fascinated by the hushed efficiency of the staff, the secret passages Darkin showed him behind bookcases, and the sheer scale of everything. His days were filled with a structured curriculum that appeared as if by magic each morning on his own tablet. There were standard lessons, math, reading, science, but also new, strange subjects like sensory acuity, physiology and lineage, and basic self-preservation. I tried to object, to insist on a normal curriculum, but Darkin was unmovable. "He is not a normal child, Isolde," he had stated, his voice calm but absolute, during one of our first tense dinners. "Ignoring his heritage will not make it go away. It will only make him vulnerable. Would you rather he learn to control his strength in a safe environment, or would you prefer he accidentally break a classmate's arm on a human playground?" His logic was infuriatingly sound. I had already seen flashes of that strength. I once saw Leo trip and fall on the hard marble floor, a fall that should have resulted in a split lip or at least a torrent of tears. He had simply picked himself up, a faint red mark on his forehead, already fading back to his normal skin tone before my eyes. Another time, he described in perfect detail the contents of a delivery truck that was still a mile away from the island, his description based entirely on the sounds its cargo was making. He was different. He was his father's son, and that fact was a constant, sharp ache in my chest. My days fell into a strange, empty rhythm. I would wake, have breakfast with Leo, and then he would be whisked away by a private tutor, a kind but unnervingly perceptive woman named Huneth. I was left to my own devices. I explored the citadel, my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty halls. I discovered a library that rivaled any university's, a state-of-the-art gym I was too intimidated to use, and an indoor pool that looked out over the stormy sea. I was given a credit card with no limit, a wardrobe filled with designer clothes that appeared in my size, and access to any food or entertainment I desired. I had everything I could ever want, and I had never felt more alone or powerless. My only act of rebellion, my only way of asserting any control, was through my interactions with Darkin. I treated him with a frosty, defiant disdain. At our nightly dinners, the only time he insisted we all be together, I answered his questions with monosyllables. I critiqued the food, I found fault with the decor, I challenged every statement he made about Leo's education. I was determined to be the crack in his perfect, controlled world. He, in turn, treated my hostility with a maddening, infuriating amusement. He would listen to my barbs, a faint smirk playing on his lips, his molten gold eyes seeming to see right through my defenses to the fear and confusion churning beneath. He never lost his temper. He never raised his voice. He simply watched me, his gaze so intense it felt like a physical touch. "The bouillabaisse is a bit salty tonight, don't you think?" I remarked one evening, pushing my bowl away. Darkin took a slow, deliberate sip from his own spoon. "I find it perfect," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Perhaps your palate is still adjusting. I'm sure my plebeian palate is just overwhelmed by such royal fare," I retorted sarcastically. "Not plebeian," he corrected gently, "just unaccustomed. There is a difference." He met my glare, his smirk widening. "You have fire, Isolde. I admire that. It will serve you well here." I hated him. I hated his confidence, his control, his ability to turn my anger into a compliment. Most of all, I hated the terrifying, traitorous flicker of heat that his focused attention ignited deep within me. It was a chemical reaction, a primal pull I couldn't control, and it left me feeling weak and disgusted with myself. He was my captor, the monster who had participated in my ruin, no matter the circumstances. I could never forget that. About a week into my gilded imprisonment, I stumbled upon something that changed my perspective. I had found my way to a secluded part of the island, a rugged, windswept clifftop overlooking the sea. Below, nestled in a protected cove, was a small village. It was picturesque, with stone cottages and a communal green, but it was the inhabitants that made me stop and stare. They were Lycans, men, women, and children, all moving with the same fluid grace as Darkin. I watched as a group of teenagers playing a game of catch suddenly laughed, and for a split second their features elongated, their teeth sharpened, their eyes flashed gold. It was a tiny partial shift, an expression of sheer joy. Later that day, I confronted Darkin. "There are other people on this island, a whole village of your kind?" He nodded, unsurprised that I'd found them. "This is the heart of the pack, the families who are closest to the Alpha line. They are my council, my warriors, my friends. They are your people now too." "They are not my people," I snapped. He ignored my protest. "It is time you and Leo met them. There is a tradition. When the heir is presented, the pack holds a celebration." A presentation? Like he's some kind of show pony? No, absolutely not. "It is not a request, Isolde," he said, his voice losing its patient edge for the first time. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. "It is a matter of security and respect. They have a right to see their future alpha, and they have a right to see the woman who is his mother. They need to know he is protected. They need to accept you." "And if they don't accept me?" I challenged, lifting my chin. His golden eyes softened, and the intensity in them was so profound it made my breath catch. "They will," he said, with a certainty that was both terrifying and strangely reassuring. "You are the mother of the heir. You are Luna. They are yours to protect as much as mine." The celebration took place 2 nights later. I was dressed in a deep blue gown that the silent housekeeper had laid out for me. It was beautiful and elegant, but it felt like a costume. As I walked onto the grand torchlight terrace overlooking the village, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Hundreds of pairs of eyes, many of them glowing with a faint, golden light in the twilight, turned to me. Darkin was waiting. He stood beside a large, ornate stone chair that looked very much like a throne. He was dressed in black, as usual, but there was a formality to his attire, a sense of occasion. He held Leo in his arms. My son, my little boy, looked out at the sea of faces not with fear, but with a calm, regal curiosity that was so much like his father, it made my heart ache. Darkin held up a hand, and his voice boomed across the terrace, imbued with a power that seemed to vibrate in the very stones. "People of the Blood Moon Pack, I present to you my son, Leo Rawl, the heir to the Alpha Throne."
A collective roar went up from the crowd. It wasn't a human sound. It was a chorus of howls, barks, and guttural cries of joy and fealty that echoed off the cliffs and out over the sea. The sheer primal power of it was overwhelming. I took an involuntary step back, my hand flying to my mouth. Darkin's eyes found mine across the space. He gave me a subtle nod, an encouragement. He then gestured to me. "And this," he called out, his voice softening but still carrying, "is his mother, Isolde. She is of our house now. She is under my protection, and therefore under the protection of the entire pack. You will show her the respect of a Luna." The crowd roared again, a sound of acceptance this time. As the celebration began, with music and food and dancing, people approached me. They were cautious at first, their gazes a mixture of curiosity and reverence. A formidable-looking man with a scarred face and the bearing of a warrior introduced himself as Griff, Darkin's beta, his second in command. He bowed his head to me. "Luna, it is an honor. We will keep you and the pup safe." An elderly woman with wise, kind eyes and silver hair braided with beads came and took my hand. It was Huneth, Leo's tutor. "He is a special boy. He has his father's strength, but I see his mother's heart in him. That is a powerful combination." I spent the evening in a daze, accepting their greetings, watching as Leo was passed from one set of strong arms to another, treated with a gentle reverence that brought tears to my eyes. These people, these monsters, loved my son. They saw him not as a mistake or a scandal, but as a promise, a future. Later, as the moon climbed high in the sky, I watched from the balustrade as some of the younger Lycans, filled with celebratory spirit, shed their human forms. The change was both horrifying and beautiful. It was not the grotesque, painful transformation of horror movies. It was fluid, natural, a seamless unfolding of their true selves. Bones lengthened and shifted, skin gave way to fur, and in moments, magnificent wolves stood where people had been. They were enormous, some as large as ponies, with thick pelts of black, gray, and brown. They ran and played on the green below, their movements filled with an unearthly power and grace. One wolf, larger than the rest, with a coat as black as night and eyes that burned like embers, broke from the pack. He trotted to the base of the terrace and looked up. At me. It was Darkin. He didn't need to speak. I could feel his question in the air between us. "Are you afraid?" I looked from the powerful, magnificent creature he was, to our son, who was sleeping peacefully in the arms of Griff's mate, Freya, and for the first time I felt a flicker of something other than fear or hatred. It was a profound, unsettling understanding. This was their world. This was Leo's world. And whether I liked it or not, it was my world now too. I met the black wolf's gaze, and I shook my head. No, I was not afraid. Not anymore.
That night marked a subtle shift in our dynamic. My hostility didn't vanish, but it was tempered by a grudging respect. I started asking questions. I spent time in the library, reading the ancient texts that detailed the history of the Lycans, their laws, their legends. I learned that they were not mindless monsters, but a proud, ancient race with a complex culture and a deep connection to the natural world. They were fierce and dangerous, yes, but they were also loyal, passionate, and fiercely protective of their own. I also learned more about Darkin's enemies. They were a splinter faction, a group of pure-blood fanatics called the Purists, led by a charismatic and ruthless alpha named Thaddeus. They believed that the Lycan bloodline should remain untainted by human blood. To them, a half-blood heir like Leo was an abomination, a weakness that would dilute their power and eventually lead to their extinction. They believe we are superior to humans in every way, Darkin explained one evening as we sat in his office, a large, imposing room with a massive fireplace. Leo was asleep upstairs. They see compassion and empathy, traits they associate with humanity, as a disease. Thaddeus believes the only way to ensure our survival is to dominate the human world, not hide from it. "And you don't?" I asked quietly. He looked at me, his golden eyes serious. "I believe our survival depends on balance, Isolde. That is our nature. But we are not savages. We have a duty to control our instincts, to protect the world we share, not to conquer it. A half-human heir, a king who understands both sides, is not a weakness. He is our best hope for a future where we are not at war." Thaddeus sees that as a threat to his entire ideology. "And my sister?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How was she involved?" Darkin's jaw tightened. "The Purists are master manipulators. They studied you, your family. They saw Morgana's jealousy, her ambition. It would have been easy for them to approach her, to offer her what she wanted most, Owen, a clear path to the family fortune, in exchange for a small favor. I doubt she ever knew the full extent of their plans. To her, she was just getting rid of a rival. She was a pawn, a useful tool in their much larger game." The idea that my sister's petty cruelty was part of a grand, supernatural conspiracy was almost too much to comprehend, but it made a twisted kind of sense. It explained the chemical taste of the drink, the efficiency of the setup. It had been too clean, too perfect. The reality of that danger became terrifyingly clear a few weeks later. Darkin had been called away to the mainland to deal with a territorial dispute. He was gone for 3 days, and his absence left a strange, unsettling void in the citadel. I found myself missing his presence, the low rumble of his voice, the intense focus of his gaze. I told myself it was just because his presence meant safety for Leo. It was a lie, and I knew it. On the 3rd night of his absence, I was woken from a deep sleep by the sound of Leo screaming.
I was out of bed in an instant, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I burst into his room to find him sitting bolt upright in his bed, his eyes wide with terror and glowing with a faint golden light. The window to his balcony, which I always locked, was wide open, the curtains billowing in the wind. "Mommy," he cried, pointing a trembling finger, "the bad doggy was here." I ran to the balcony, my blood running cold. There was nothing there but the wind and the sea. But on the stone railing was a single, long, deep scratch mark, as if from a massive claw. And lying on the floor was a single black feather, unlike any bird I had ever seen. Griff and his security team were there within minutes. The citadel was locked down. Every inch of the island was searched. They found tracks near the cliff face, the tracks of a massive wolf, but one whose scent was foreign and hostile. The intruder had come and gone like a ghost. He hadn't tried to take Leo. He had just wanted to show us that he could. He wanted us to know that we were not safe. When Darkin returned the next morning, his face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. He listened to Griff's report, his jaw clenched so tightly a muscle jumped. He looked at the black feather, and a low, feral growl rumbled in his chest. "A Corvus," he bit out. "Thaddeus's personal assassins. They are Lycans who can also take the form of giant ravens.
They are his eyes and ears. He turned to me, and the raw power rolling off him was so intense I could barely breathe. But when he spoke, his voice was quiet, his eyes filled with a self-loathing that stunned me. This is my fault. I underestimated him. I left you unprotected. We were fine, I said, my voice trembling slightly. They didn't get to him. They weren't trying to get to him, he countered, his voice dangerously low. This was a message, a warning, and it was a test of my defenses. He strode to the window and looked out at the gray sea. He will not make that mistake again. Next time, he will not come for a message. That night, dinner was a silent, tense affair. I could see the wheels turning in Darkin's mind. He was planning, strategizing, preparing for a war. After Leo was put to bed, I found him in his office, staring into the fire. Isolde, we need to talk, he said without turning around. I stood in the doorway, my arms wrapped around myself. About what? He finally turned to face me. The firelight cast flickering shadows across his face, making his features seem even more sharp and predatory. About the contract. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. What about it? The clause, he said, his voice a low rumble. About us presenting a united front. About sharing a residence. I have my own suite. Leo knows we have separate rooms. It's fine. It's not fine, he said, taking a step toward me. Not anymore. Tonight was a reminder that this is not a game. Leo's life is in danger. The best way to protect him, the best way to show our enemies that this family is unbreakable, is to follow our traditions, to the letter.
He was standing in front of me now, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his body. I had to tilt my head back to look at him. What are you saying? I whispered, though I already knew. I am saying, he murmured, his golden eyes burning into mine, that starting tonight, you will sleep in my room, in my bed. No, I said, my voice shaking. I tried to back away, but my back was already against the doorframe. I won't. You can't make me. Can't I? He whispered. His hand came up and gently, so gently, cupped my jaw. His thumb stroked across my cheek. It was not a threatening gesture, but it was one of absolute possession. I am the Alpha. This is my citadel. My word is law. But I am not asking you as your Alpha. His voice dropped even lower, becoming a rough, intimate caress. I am asking you as your son's father. Help me protect him, Isolde. Show them there are no cracks in this foundation for them to exploit. I stared up at him, trapped by the intensity of his gaze, by the terrifying logic of his words. He was right. Any sign of division between us was a weakness, an invitation for our enemies to strike. But the thought of being in his bed, of that level of intimacy with him, it was terrifying. Not because I thought he would hurt me, but because of the way my own body betrayed me whenever he was near. Tears of frustration and fear pricked at my eyes. I felt the carefully constructed walls I had built around my heart begin to crumble. The loneliness, the fear for my son, the constant draining battle against my own unwanted feelings for this impossible, dangerous man, it was all too much. A single tear escaped and traced a hot path down my cheek. I saw his expression change. The hard, alpha command in his eyes softened into something else, something deeper and more vulnerable. It looked like regret. Isolde, he breathed, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. He wiped the tear away with his thumb. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I know what you think of me. But what happened that night, I swear to you on my son's life, I did not know you were drugged. Had I known, I would have killed any man who dared to touch you. I would have protected you. His words, his raw sincerity, shattered the last of my defenses. A sob escaped me, and then another. The dam broke, and 6 years of pain, of loneliness, of repressed trauma came pouring out. I buried my face in my hands and wept, my body shaking with the force of it. He held me, one hand stroking my hair, the other pressed firmly against the small of my back, holding me steady. He didn't speak. He just held me, letting me release all the poison I had held inside for so long. He smelled of pine and ozone and something that was uniquely, intoxicatingly him.
When my sobs finally subsided, I felt drained, empty, but strangely calm. I pulled back, my face flushed and blotchy, and refused to meet his eyes. I'm sorry, I mumbled, wiping at my cheeks. Don't be, he said softly. He gently tilted my chin up, forcing me to look at him. His golden eyes were filled with a fierce, protective light. You have nothing to be sorry for. You are the strongest woman I have ever met. And then he lowered his head and kissed me.
It was not a demanding, passionate kiss. It was gentle, tentative, a question. His lips were soft, warm, and they tasted of wine and fire and regret. For a heartbeat, I was frozen, and then my traitorous body responded. My eyes fluttered shut, and I leaned into him, my hands clutching at his shirt. I kissed him back. It was a kiss that spoke of shared pain, of a strange, unwanted connection, of the terrifying possibility of a future I had never imagined. When he finally pulled away, we were both breathless. We stared at each other, the air crackling with unspoken words, with a dangerous, terrifying new understanding. Before either of us could speak, a shrill alarm blared through the citadel, a sound I had never heard before. It was a piercing, urgent shriek that signaled a major security breach. Red lights began to flash in the corridor. Darkin was instantly transformed. The tenderness in his eyes was replaced by the cold, hard steel of the Alpha King. "Stay here," he commanded, his voice a low growl. "Lock the door, do not open it for anyone but me or Griff." He turned and was gone, moving with a silent, lethal speed that was barely human. I did as he said, slamming the heavy office door shut and turning the deadbolt. My heart was pounding, not from the kiss, but from the alarm. I waited for what felt like an eternity, the sound of the alarm drilling into my skull. Then my blood ran cold. I heard a sound from upstairs, from Leo's room, a crash. Forgetting Darkin's command, forgetting everything but my son, I wrenched the door open and sprinted up the grand staircase. Leo's door was ajar. I pushed it open, my heart in my throat. The room was in disarray. The window to his balcony was shattered. And standing in the middle of the room, her back to me, was a woman with hair as black as midnight. She turned slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and haunted. It was Morgana, my sister, and in her hands she held a small silver dagger. "Morgana?" I breathed, my mind refusing to accept what I was seeing. "What are you doing here? Where is Leo?" She gave me a broken, watery smile. "I'm so sorry, Izzy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They made me. They told me if I didn't bring them the boy, they would kill us all. They would tell father." From the shadows of the balcony, a figure emerged. It was a tall, lean man with cruel, pale eyes and a contemptuous sneer. He was holding my son. Leo was struggling, but the man held him in an iron grip, his hand clamped over Leo's mouth. It was Thaddeus. I knew it instantly from the sheer malevolence that rolled off him.
"So," Thaddeus said, his voice a silky, menacing drawl, "the happy family, reunited at last. It's a touching scene." He looked from me to Morgana. She did well, didn't she? A bit of pressure, a threat to her comfortable little life, and she led us right to your door. So much for family loyalty. My gaze was fixed on Leo, on the terror in his eyes. "Let him go," I snarled, my voice a low, animalistic sound I didn't recognize as my own. Thaddeus laughed. "I don't think so. The boy is coming with me. We have plans for him." He started to back away, pulling Leo with him toward the shattered balcony railing. "Don't try to follow. My corvus are waiting. You'll never see him again." He was going to jump. He was going to take my son. A primal, instinctual rage I didn't know I possessed erupted inside me. Everything went red. I wasn't Isolde Rivera, the quiet art historian, anymore. I was a mother protecting her cub. I let out a scream of pure, undiluted fury and launched myself across the room. And that's where we have to leave part 2. What an insane cliffhanger. Isolde has finally found her strength, but is it enough to save Leo from the clutches of the evil Alpha Thaddeus? And what role will her sister Morgana play in all of this? I am on the edge of my seat, and I know you are too. What do you think will happen next? Will Darkin get there in time? Will Isolde unlock some kind of hidden power of her own? Let me know all your theories and predictions in the comments below. I read every single one, and I love hearing what you guys think. If you enjoyed this part of the story and you want to find out what happens to Leo and Isolde, please, please, please show your support by hitting that like button, sharing this video with a friend who loves a good paranormal romance, and most importantly, make sure you are subscribed to the channel with all notifications turned on so you don't miss the thrilling conclusion in part 3. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.